It's a story of persistence, survival, and ruthless politics. China's President Xi Jinping is one of the most powerful men in the world and revered within the Communist Party he now leads. But it hasn't always been this way. Xi has stared down revolutionary fervor and muscled out rivals in an atmosphere of brutal party politics to now become China's most powerful leader since Mao. In this episode, we map Xi Jinping's astonishing tale from life among Beijing's elite to living in a cave in remote countryside, and now paramount leader of China.
I'm Sean Manteso, and this is China Watch.
1969年的1月份，全部都哭啊！那整个专列上没有不哭的人，就是我在笑，哎。当时底下我那些亲属说：“你怎么还笑？”我说：“我不走才得哭啊！我不走在这儿不就有命没命我都不知道了，我这走不是好。”
It was here, in a cave among the dusty, barren hills of Shanxi province in northwest China, that President Xi Jinping spent more than 6 years in exile as a young man.
当时这个放羊啊，就把羊圈在这么一个，就是一个帽上，它叫山帽上，然后我就坐在那儿就看书了，看书冥想。
It's a long way from the sheltered comfort of his life in the walled compounds that housed Beijing's political elite. Born in 1953, Xi Jinping was the son of a famous revolutionary, Xi Zhongxun. But Xi and his family's life was turned upside down by the political turmoil that engulfed China in the 1960s. In 1962, Xi's father was purged and jailed by Chairman Mao's regime for allegedly supporting a contentious novel.
Xi Jinping is from what we call a princely group. So his father was actually a high-level leader in the Maoist period. The Cultural Revolution started in 1966. And so Xi Jinping had to go down to the countryside, as they called it then, and for that reason was excluded from school and from other kinds of activities.
The Cultural Revolution was a violent and destructive period for China. Intellectuals and other so-called enemies of the regime were publicly humiliated, tortured, and hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives, including Xi Jinping's oldest sister.
It's the formative time for the whole generation, so not just him, but anyone of his age. They said in Chinese, you eat bitterness. They ate bitterness then, and so they're not people who give up easily. It's made a pretty tough generation.
The chaotic years of the Cultural Revolution appear to have had a profound impact on Xi. Unlike many others who were ostracised, Xi didn't turn against the Communist Party. Instead, sources say, he became redder than red to survive.
And Xi Jinping is a true Leninist. He therefore wants to put the party in charge of all policy areas and in all geographical areas in China as a whole.
And still tarnished by his father's arrest, it took Xi 10 attempts to join the Communist Party.
So it was difficult for him to join the Communist Party because of that family background. But in the end, he prevailed, and actually in the final attempt, I think, 1973, he managed to get in, just as the Cultural Revolution was really sort of relaxing and sort of dissipating.
It was here, in the ashes of one of China's most destructive periods, and with the country on the verge of opening itself to the world, that Xi Jinping began a long, patient, and impressive rise through China's political apparatus. While China was transforming, so too was Xi. He left Shanxi in 1975 to study chemical engineering at the prestigious Tsinghua University, advancing his political career through various county, municipal, and provincial leadership positions over the next 2 decades. One of the more prominent positions Xi held was as party chief of Zhejiang province from 2002 until 2007, where he cultivated his economic credentials and a clean image.
就是在那儿讲一个公道啊，我们干部不要去伤害人民的利益。
In all, he'd serve across 4 provinces and the municipality of Shanghai in varying levels of governance. But even by the early 2000s, Xi wasn't on the radar for national leadership until a more senior position became vacant. In 2006, then Communist Party Secretary of Shanghai, Chen Liangyu, was sacked in one of China's highest-level corruption investigations. Xi Jinping was chosen to replace him in what was a major step up in his political career. In just a decade, Xi had risen from relative obscurity to potential leader, and his ascension to party chief of Shanghai came just in time for the 2007 17th National Party Congress, where the party would decide who would lead the country when the current generation of leaders retire in 2012.
At the 17th Party Congress, when the government under Hu Jintao was to decide on the choice of the next generation of successors, Hu Jintao's first choice was in fact Li Keqiang, but there were some pushbacks from within the party, including from Jiang Zemin's people and the remnants of the Shanghai gang. And Xi Jinping was able to persuade the party establishment across the board that he would be a better candidate for it.
Just how Xi managed to gain the support of the party is unclear. The Communist Party is notoriously opaque in its inner workings. But at the 17th National Party Congress, Xi pulled off an unlikely rout of his political adversaries.
He was elected onto what we call the Standing Committee of the Politburo. So that's the ultimate group of, at that time, 9 people running the country.
I want to welcome Vice President Xi to the Oval Office and welcome him to the United States.
Xi now seemed destined to lead the party that once sent him to live in a cave. He spent the next 4 years travelling the world and preparing himself for the presidency. But the wider world still didn't know what kind of leader Xi would become. But one candid moment captured in Mexico in 2009 gave us some indication.
有些这个吃饱了没事干的外国人呢，对我们的事情指手画脚，中国一不输出革命，二不输出饥饿和贫困，三不去折腾你们，还有什么好说的？
Party faithful have made the pilgrimage to China's National People's Congress.
Behind the giant facade, a very big transition was about to take place, with a new guard taking hold of the controls here. Then, after a long wait, they emerged.
By the start of his tenure in 2013, he was given 3 crucial roles: head of the Communist Party, military and state, already distinguishing him from his predecessor Hu Jintao. It was a sign of things to come. Xi immediately seized on his new powers and launched an anti-corruption crackdown on so-called tigers and flies, high-ranking officials and local servants. It reportedly snared more than 1.5 million government officials.
Now, in reality, at that time, not fully recognized by other party leaders, the anti-corruption campaign was also a party ratification campaign.
President Xi went after his political rivals, one after another after another.
Well, no one could be a leader of the Communist Party of China without being pretty ruthless. As I say, it's a world without sentiment. It's a fairly it's a winner-takes-all game. So there is no room for mercy in this system.
Xi spent his first 5 years in office strengthening his grip on power. But no matter how much power he accumulated, there was a 10-year constitutional limit on his leadership. Then, when it came time to nominate a successor in early 2018, Xi made an extraordinary move.
Lawmakers in China have passed an historic constitutional amendment that will allow the president to rule indefinitely.
The National People's Congress has just approved a constitutional amendment to abolish presidential term limits. President Xi, already one of the most powerful Chinese leaders in decades, will now be able to rule indefinitely, perhaps for life.
With presidential term limits abolished, Xi has also been steadily creating a personality cult through media, pop culture, and propaganda. This, along with his expanding powers, have drawn many comparisons to the founder of the People's Republic, Chairman Mao,
who now stands alongside Chairman Mao in the pantheon of the country's iconic leaders.
He's promised a new era for China, but critics of President Xi Jinping have compared him to Chairman Mao.
Is moving towards a position which, if he succeeds, will be comparable in influence to Mao.
Xi Jinping has also ushered in a new era of Chinese assertiveness on the world stage. He's silencing his critics with one of the world's most rigorous censorship regimes. But with the accumulation of great power comes great risks.
They say on the streets in China, it's risky to retire, meaning that you'll be unprotected then against the people you've made enemies when you're at the top. And so the only way to prevent that is to stay there. Now, power is a very strong drug to wean yourself off.
If China were to face a crisis, and with a few brewing on the horizon, there may be only one man to blame. Xi's firm grip on power leaves little wiggle room in case of failure. His political fortunes are now tied to those of his country. It's a lot of power and a lot of responsibility and risk for one man to take on.